Getting into your top choice of medical school is no easy task. You spend ages working to get the right A-level grades, studying for entrance exams, writing a personal statement and doing extracurricular activities that will make you stand out. Medical school applications are some of the most competitive of any course at university. Medical schools are looking for well-rounded individuals who will make good doctors and know what the job entails. It's a very stressful experience, and I'm sure you have many questions, such as what kind of work experience do I need? What will I expect to interview? But luckily for you, I've been through it all, and I've created this video as a succinct guide on the whole application process. Medical school is extremely content heavy. You have tons of lectures ranging from basic sciences to microbiology, biochemistry, pharmacology. Then you have the human interaction side of things, where you have to learn how to take a history from a patient, examine them, and then form diagnoses and management plans for over 100 different conditions, probably close to 1,000. I don't even know at this point, my brain is fried. Basically, take it from a final year medical student, it's a lot of work. Best way that universities can judge whether or not you can handle that workload is by your academics, pretty much. Most schools require GCSEs in English, maths and sciences, and most will require grade 5 at minimum. However, most medical schools stress that the most successful candidates score 7s, 8s and 9s at GCSE. It's important to know the GCSE requirements of each school so that you can choose your subjects wisely, or shortlist your choice of universities that definitely meet your criteria. A-levels. But broadly speaking, most medical schools require chemistry and biology at A-level. If you want the broadest choice of medical schools, it's a good idea you choose A-level physics alongside biology and chemistry. I personally did biology, chemistry, maths and further maths, and I wish I did physics instead of further maths because honestly, we barely ever use maths apart from, say, basic drug calculations. And it also goes without saying you're looking to get good A-level grades in all of them. However, I will say there is leeway with some universities, so it's important to check their required grade criteria for each university you want to apply to, just to make sure what they need specifically. Whilst ultimately the grades you'll be getting at A-level will be considered first, it's important not to disqualify GCSEs as they are also very important. Most medical schools tend to look at the overall picture when assessing prospective medical students. You stand a much better chance wherever you're looking to apply for medicine if you have a strong academic history at your backing. Primarily, you should be carrying out work experience to decide whether medicine is really for you or not. Most people want to do medicine because they are good at science, but actually when they start doing work experience, they realize it's actually not the job for them. Medicine is a very long and expensive training. Both you and the medical schools you're applying to need to know whether medicine is actually right for you, and that's why work experience is so essential. Medical schools do, however, recognize it's getting increasingly difficult to get work experience with the virus. However, loads of medical students are still getting work experience, and the most important tip with actually getting work experience is to apply early. There are loads of prospective medical students, and it's important to consider there are also nursing students and other health science applicants, so everyone is going to want a bite of the cherry. Make sure you are very organized and take advantage of any and every experience that comes your way. Don't just look at hospitals or GP surgeries or nursing homes. Think laterally. Special needs schools, homeless shelters, children's hospices. I personally got amazing experiences volunteering at children's hospice. Really eye-opening. All of these can give you valuable experience in relevant health or care settings. So most UK medical schools require an admissions test to help identify the best candidates, and these tests are the UCAT, the BMAT and the GAMSAT. So you have to appreciate that most people applying will have straight A's, so the medical schools need a way of filtering out certain people because there's just so many applicants. They don't test what you know, rather they test how well you can think under considerable time pressure. The test designers claim that preparation does not help since it tests intellect rather than knowledge, but that's bullshit. You can prepare for it and you should. So whilst cramming for the test won't help you since outside knowledge is not required for the UCAT and only required to a limited degree for the BMAT, you should instead focus on 1, learning the formats. Number 2 is practice. You should practice mocks under timed conditions to maximize the amount of marks you can get on the day. And number 3, you should be selective with your answers. Be like a doctor, triage certain questions that you feel like might be harder. So if a question seems to be challenging and time consuming, just put the best answer you think it'll be very quickly and just come back to it later on, because you don't want to be wasting time getting stuck on a certain question and not have time to answer the other questions. This includes questions with unusually long pieces of text or pages of information on them. There are more marks and quicker marks on questions you've yet to encounter. If you have time after your first pass of the questions, you can come back to it later on and look at the questions that you've skipped or just answered quickly for. An essential fact to bear in mind is that there's no negative marking. meaning that there's no penalty for answering incorrect questions on the UCAT and the BMAT. So there's no reason why you should make educated guesses for certain questions. Thus, it's important you put an answer down for every single question. If you don't answer all the questions in that exam, you have made a big mistake, my friend. Leaving questions blank is the same thing as just giving up marks that could have been yours. And if you guys want a more detailed video on the UCAT, just let me know down in the comments. So the next step in the application process is choosing your school. The choice of your medical school greatly affects your ability to get an offer to study medicine. You need to select medical schools that match your academic and non-academic needs. So there are 4 broad areas that I considered heavily when I was applying. Number 1, the basic eligibility criteria, GCSE and A-level requirements. How long is the course? Is it a 5-year course? Is it a 6-year course with a foundation year? Is it a 4-year course if you're a graduate student? All of these are important. You need to see how eligible you are for the certain courses. And if you're not sure, just check with the admissions office. Just ring them up or check online. They're usually very friendly and they're more than happy to help you. Number 2, it's worth considering how competitive certain courses are and try to have a safe bet. So put a medical school you think is not as competitive, just to make it less likely you're going to be taking a year out to reapply. Number 3 is the type of course. So these can be divided into problem-based learning, integrated and traditional courses. However, it's worth bearing in mind that elements of PBL are being incorporated into most courses now. Also the university, so looking in terms of geography. Will it be either a campus? Will it be a collegiate-based uni? Will it be more city-based? And this was a big thing for me. You're going to be in this place for about 5 to 6 years, so you really want to think about the place you're going to be spending those years in. For example, I did 3 years at King's College London, which is very city-based, and I had enough of being in a city. I'm born and raised in London. I wanted to experience a more sort of campus-based uni, something a bit closer and tighter-knit. That's why I applied to my university, which is HIMSS. Also think about the type of personality certain universities attract, and think, would you fit with that personality or stereotype? So as I said, there are 3 main types of courses: PBL, integrated and traditional courses. And we're going to talk about PBL first. So the main emphasis of problem-based learning, or simply PBL, is on small group working centered around a problem or scenario, as the name implies, and these scenarios are hypothetical patient cases. So let's go through the pros and cons of each. PBL is big on teamwork, and that's a really important skill as a doctor, so training this skill from day 1 is going to be very, very handy for you. And with PBL courses, there's usually early clinical exposure to supplement the clinical cases you'll be studying. And it's also very self-directed in terms of learning as well. Moving on to the cons, as I said, the self-directed learning can be a bit much for certain people. If you don't really have the discipline to do that, it's going to be a lot harder to keep up with work rather than, say, in a very lecture-based course. Another problem with PBL, it's a less standardized form of teaching, meaning that it does heavily rely on the quality of your actual teaching facilitator, so the doctor or surgeon or whoever's going to be teaching you. That does vary, and you can say that certain teachers are better than others. There may be also large gaps in scientific understanding. Moving on, we have traditional courses. These are very heavy on the lecture material in the first part of the course, and it does cover a lot of the basic sciences as well. And then the second part of the course is when you're going to be more clinical and going into hospital a lot more. And the pros of this is that it gives you the best understanding of the actual science behind the medicine you're going to be learning. And also you could argue that having the clinical exposure after you've learned all that science is going to be where it's going to be most beneficial. It's very out of touch with real medicine during the preclinical time. And the biggest con for me, and why I didn't pick a traditional course, is that you spend hours and hours learning unnecessary scientific minutiae and detail that you're just going to forget as soon as you leave that exam hall. And finally, we have integrated courses, which is a bit of a hybrid between the two. And the pros of these is that they also give you good early clinical exposure. Another pro of integrated courses is that they give you relevant scientific information at the appropriate stage of your course. For me, I think integrated is probably the best. And some cons of integrated courses is that you'll be receiving lectures for quite a while throughout your degree. If you don't like lectures, that's probably not going to be the best for you. Also, early clinical exposure can give a bit of anxiety to certain people who haven't learned the theory first. But I understand that theory, they may be a bit more anxious speaking to patients. Personal statement is extremely important. It may take multiple drafts and several weeks to perfect, but honestly, this is time well spent. The personal statement is basically your chance to flex to the medical school why they should pick you versus the thousands and thousands of other applicants that are trying to get that sweet space. And due to its personal nature, it's a good opportunity to stand out. It's basically a sales pitch. A few tips for your personal statement. Every single word must be chosen carefully to convey as much information as possible in clear and concise English. And honestly, do not waste a single line. Do not copy. All UCAS forms are checked for plagiarism. If you copy something, you're honestly stupid. So what have you learnt? Listing experiences of what you've done is not enough. You need to actually say what you've gathered from those experiences, what you've learnt, how they've improved you, and why they make you into a person that will be a good candidate to be a doctor. Also seek help. Whilst it is your own work, it is vital to seek advice from medical students, doctors, anyone basically with experience, to have a look at your personal statement and act on any comments they make, and don't be afraid to make any major changes. I have personally checked many people's personal statements who have now gone into medical school, and feel free to DM me if you want me to have a look at yours as well. I will be more than happy to. So another tip is to think of your reader. Think of the person who's going to be reading that personal statement and write it for them. That one particular marker may have hundreds of personal statements that they're going to be going through that particular day. Don't feel the need to include waffly or very vague statements. For example, if you want to use quotes, try use only 1 or 2 max. Don't overdo it. A nice quote here or there could be a nice touch. And lastly, be convincing. If you make a claim that's unusual for a student about to finish their A-levels, make sure you back it up with some kind of evidence. So now that you've submitted your application, you've waited a while and you've received an email saying that you've been invited for an interview. And now, as happy as this moment is, it can, on the other hand, cause a great deal of anxiety for those who are not well prepared or ready for it. And it doesn't help that different medical schools have a variety of different ways to interview their prospective medical students. Often there's either 2 or 3 interviews in what's called a small panel. These interviewers could be doctors or other people that are teaching in the medical school. And some medical schools actually invite senior medical students to help interviews as well. I've personally interviewed for my medical school multiple times, and it is quite an interesting experience to say the least. If you're faced with a panel, make sure you don't panic. In most cases, only one person will be asking the questions and the other one will be taking notes, or sometimes both people may ask questions. And remember, the panel interview tries to get a more balanced view of your suitability for their medical school. For your interview, such an important piece of advice is make sure you don't leave it to the last minute, like with everything really. Something that I think is absolutely key for medical school interviews is looking at relevant topics. Certain medical schools would like to ask prospective medical students if they're keeping up with the news. For me, for example, when I was applying, the junior doctors' strikes were a big deal, and they did ask us that on interview, what we thought about it. Another tip is to tell the interviewer why you want to study at that medical school. So if you tell the university there's nothing particularly different about their course compared to other universities, and you don't really make them feel special, it's going to be very hard to stand out. Something that will really make you stand out and will leave a good impression on your interviewer is knowing why you want to study that course and having a list of reasons ready for why you want to study there. I personally got this question in my interview, and I had a fat list of reasons why I wanted to study at this university, so much that I didn't even get time to say it all because I was gassing the university up so much. The examiner was loving it, they had a big smile on their face, and honestly, this is something that you should do, and if you don't do it, you're silly. So I'll be releasing a video shortly on how to pick a certain medical school because it's such a big factor for your application, so I thought I'd go into more detail and release a separate video. But if there's any other particular parts of the application process you'd like me to cover, feel free to let me know down in the comments, and I'll be sure to make a video of that. So thank you again guys for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.